Alright, sometimes when we clone or deploy OVFs and whatnot, we get this error about device eth0 does not seem to be present. Seems like I figure this out every semester we run this class, and I promptly forget what I did to fix it, and I had to figure it out again. So this video is going to show you a couple of different ways you can fix this issue. The easiest way is to realize that what's going on is that now it thinks it's eth2 instead of eth0. So if you look at this file, it'll tell you about your network adapters. If we look in there, we see that we have eth0, eth1, and eth2. So basically, they did something with CentOS and Red Hat so that if you bring the system up and there's a different hardware in double quotes, since this is a virtual machine, there's different hardware, it gives it a different interface number. So the easiest way to fix the issue is to just go with eth2. And in order to do that, we need to make a copy of the file that gets read by the system when you try to bring up interfaces, and that file is in eth0 sysconfig network scripts. If you look in there, we have a ifconfig eth0, ifconfig eth1, but we don't have an ifconfig eth2, so we copy one of those existing files, eth1 to ifconfig eth2. We edit the eth2 file and basically change it up to make it look like eth1. I already edited this eth1 file to remove the MAC address. So if the MAC address is still in your file, you want to get rid of the MAC address. I'm going to change this IPv4 init failure to fatal. I'm going to change that to no because I don't have a DHCP server on that subnet we're using, and it's going to fail to get an address, but I don't want the interface to go down. I could change this up to set it statically in this file, but I'm just going to set it statically at the command line because we're just doing this temporarily. If this is something you're doing in the real world, you want to actually give it the correct settings. So now, if you do if up eth2, then that should come up as eth2. This is going to fail. I don't know why I didn't go ahead and change that to save us the time of waiting for it to fail, but I didn't. We'll wait for this to fail, getting an IP because there's no DHCP server on that subnet, and once it fails, we'll be able to continue on with our exercise because exercising is fun, and I'm trying to talk the whole time it's doing this because there's nothing worse in a video than dead air, right? So eventually this is going to fail to get an IP address from the DHCP server because there is no DHCP server on this subnet. And once it fails to get a DHCP server IP address, then we can continue with what we want to do. How long is this going to take? My God. Alright, hey, it finally failed, thankfully. But if we do ifconfig, we see the eth2 is there because I changed that setting to no. So now I can use ifconfig to set the IP address or IP adder if you're like against using deprecated commands. I don't care. I'm using deprecated commands. So I'm going to set the IP to 52 because I know that's an available IP address in my subnet. I've given you some IPs you can use in the lab. So I'm going to do that. If I wanted to get off of my network, I would need to add a route add default gateway 192.168.240.1, and now I'll make sure I can ping. I should be able to ping off my network, and there we go. So that fixed it that way. Another way you can fix it is you can edit the ifconfig eth0 line. You can delete the MAC address. You can change this thing to no. I'm going to change boot proto to static because I don't want to have to wait for a DHCP to fail while this thing reboots. And then you can also go into that file I showed you a while ago. I tested this earlier. I should have wrote down the steps because I'm pretty sure I'm going to mess it up. So you go into this file. That was Control A to get me to the beginning of the line. And if you delete everything, when it runs, well, two things you can do. You can delete everything, or you can change this to eth0. I'm going to go with delete everything. because that's what I want to do. Save that file, right? So now you've deleted everything out of the file, so when you reboot, it will find an interface, and it will not have any interfaces in there, so it should make that interface eth0, and we will hope that's what happens while we wait for this system to reboot. Hopefully it will find the interface and call it eth0, and it will be up when we log in. It won't have an IP address because I didn't put those settings in the file, but it should be up as eth0, so that I can give it an IP address with ifconfig command. And so that wasn't too bad. So there we go. Now I have eth0, so I can use my ifconfig command again for eth0. eth0. Use my route command again to add a route, and then ping again. Hey, check that out. So if you deploy an OVA, OVF file, use the OVF tool to deploy something, use the vCenter converter tool to deploy our little CentOS machine, and you get issues with the network. That's two ways you can fix it so that we can continue with the lab as expected.